Welcome back to the Goldmark Gallery. As we prepare to open our latest exhibition of ceramics by Lisa Hammond this weekend, I've been thinking an awful lot about the amount of time and energy that goes into putting a show like this on. It's made me think about the difficulties, the stresses of being a potter in today's world. Pottery is a materially resource-rich art. It's an art that is time greedy. It drains an awful lot from the artists themselves. And we've often described Lisa Hammond as Britain's busiest potter. She has a huge number of projects on the go at any one time. More than that though, Lisa Hammond is almost exceptional in the amount of time that she sacrifices, that she surrenders for the sake of other people. Over the last 20 or so years, she's brought up more than a dozen apprentices. In fact, one of the more recent apprentices, Florian Gadsby, has written about his time under Lisa and this latest exhibition for our exhibition catalogue. She also helped found Adopt a Potter, a charity to help place young potters with elder established studio potters as a kind of apprenticeship scheme. That grew in 2017 to Clay College Stoke, which continues to teach the skills of working pottery with diplomas every 2 years. It's survived through COVID and is ongoing. And on top of all of that, Lisa has her business, Maze Hill Pottery, to run with its standard wear range, which you might have seen here at the gallery. She attends fairs, she runs courses. You'll see her all over the place when it comes to ceramics. And somehow, with all of that going on around her, she still manages to find time every 3 years to put the best of her work away, stored underneath the floorboards at Maze Hill in preparation for shows like this. This is her 6th exhibition at the Goldmark Gallery. As we go around this exhibition, I hope to maybe talk a little bit about how these pots are made, but more importantly, to show how the way that Lisa works, the kind of environment and the stresses that she puts her pots under, have produced such extraordinarily beautiful and definitive work. I hope you enjoy this exhibition. What's astonishing when it comes to Lisa's work is that with every one of her new exhibitions, she somehow manages to instill a completely different character, a different feel to each one, even though in these pots we can still see her sort of typical character, her typical style. Lisa has been soda firing for over 4 decades now. It's become a major part of her identity as a potter, a major part of her innovation within the pot world.
Do any drop-in at all?
51.
Oh, we're going to real struggle to get enough soda in this.
Soda firing is really, at its essence, no different from salt firing. Soda is released into the kiln at high temperatures, it vaporizes, it's carried on the atmosphere, and as it lands on a pot, it will react with the clay, with glazes, slips. The more variety can be made with those clay bodies, with slips, with glazes, the more variety in the textures, the colours that we'll see. So we can get that kind of beautiful citrus peel texture that's so typical of salt firing, but also many more besides that. When salt firing was first sort of discovered by German potters in the 1300s, it was essentially a way of very efficiently glazing your pots. You could stack your kiln, introduce salt to the kiln, and you kind of let the two do their work. By the end of your firing, you had beautiful glazed pots. There's a kind of irony that what was once an efficient, time-saving, material-saving process in Lisa's hands has now become something that is wonderfully drawn out. It's a way of firing that has occupied her entire working career. It's one that she continues to find fascinates, changes, reveals new information, one that she's continually exploiting, and which she's trying to work inefficiently to drive the soda across the pot surfaces, to combine different materials in interesting ways, and hope that the atmosphere that she's built up in her kiln will deliver something new, interesting, and absorbing for an exhibition like this. You can see some of that erratic behaviour, that unsure path of the soda playing out on this array of pots on these 2 shelves here that show the kind of breadth of what Lisa can achieve in soda firing, and also the breadth of forms that are in her repertoire. Soda suits Lisa's environment, and it suits her temperament too. The waste product of soda ash in the kiln is carbon dioxide. It's much less toxic than a normal traditional salt firing, and that's better suited to her urban location in Maze Hill and Greenwich. But also, it's the way that the soda is introduced to the kiln that really allows Lisa to play in the way that she does, to draw out the kind of dramatic surfaces that we can see on some of these pots here. Unlike salt, which when introduced to the kiln vaporizes very easily, floods the kiln, and you have a kind of a sprinkling of the beautiful orange peel effect on all your pots. The soda is injected into the kiln, it's sprayed through solution, it's sprayed through these tiny portholes within the kiln. And as a result, it's highly volatile, it's highly dependent on all the variables that surround and can complicate a firing. Things like the temperature of the kiln, the movement of the flame, even high winds and bad weather can wreak havoc with a firing. Even the shape of the cone of the spray as it's spraying into the kiln itself, as it clips the kiln bricks and is dispersed across the pots. This can completely change the movement of soda throughout the kiln. It can completely change the character of the pots that are in there. As the soda comes into contact with the pots, it's a violent and volatile reaction that goes on. And that drama plays out on the surfaces of these pots. It's mirrored in the way that Lisa decorates with her chino glazes, with the way that she pours, with the way that she swipes slip or swipes glaze around the surface of a pot. In its variability and its volatility, in fact, soda firing in the way that Lisa does is not entirely unlike a wood firing, a traditional wood firing in an anagama kiln. And in fact, there are some pots in this exhibition that came from one such firing at the Oxford Anagama kiln, which Lisa was part of recently. It's interesting to see a very different, a completely different palette, a kind of muted browns and ochres, which you get from that kind of natural ash accumulation in a wood firing on Lisa's forms, something you don't see very often. That's one of the things I love about Lisa's pottery, is that she is so in tune with the kind of violence of soda firing, of that atmosphere within the kiln, that the forms of her pots are made to sort of counter that. They are a kind of perfect foil to the vagaries of soda. You have these wonderful, tall, leaning jugs that stand proud. They've got wonderful character as they're pulled backwards. When Lisa makes these, she has to actually exaggerate that movement, exaggerate that curve back in their form, because as the clay tightens and twists, it's pulled back into shape. You also have these beautiful moon jars. There's a number of them through the show, and these smaller oval vases and paddle bottles. There is a kind of serenity to their curves, or in the case of some of the cut bottles, a kind of severity. Both of these ways of making forms, of shaping pots, are done with the fickle behaviour of soda in mind. Surfaces for the soda to flush around, to bleed from. They wear these sort of chemical flashes, these bleeds, these scorched walls, as if they were always meant to. And a little bit like the way that Lisa weathers the environment around her, weathers the intensity of her many projects. Her forms stand proud. They take the effects of the kiln, and they come out all the more rich, engaging, and beautiful to look at for it. I think you can tell an awful lot about a pot from the shadow that it puts beneath it. It's the space that it occupies, the place that it has in the world. And these oval paddle bottles by Lisa are, I think, among the nicest forms in this show. They're among her most special pots. There's something about this beautiful, graceful generosity to their forms. You want to pick them up and cradle them in your fingers and turn them round. Some of them have her distinctive swirled horse-eye decoration. Some have striped applications of slip. Others, like this one, have simply allowed the movement of the soda and the flame in the kiln and this slip on the pot to give this beautiful variety of colour and texture. They remind me a little bit of handling pebbles that have been rounded in the lap of the sea. There's something beautifully natural and almost sort of ancient about this shape. If a pot like this makes you want to pick it up and feel it in your hands, it's these large tsubo, which are the standout pieces in this exhibition, that are irresistible to the touch. The way the slip has been brushed over the surface of these pots, the way that the soda firing has sort of encrusted with this beautiful mixture of greys and silver tones on top of this tan colour. It's the kind of pot that you want to run your fingers over. And like the oval bottles, there's this fantastic weight, this beautiful, graceful generosity to the way it sits from foot to shoulder, the curve of its belly. Everything about it is just wonderfully serene. It's a fantastic foil, a fantastic setting for this dramatic movement from the soda firing around it. Lisa's pottery seems to have its relations in the East. We have forms from Japan, we have the mitsusashi, we have these beautiful eagerware vase forms with their characteristic ear-like lugs. There are the sake bottle sets, there are yunomi, chawan, pots from the tea ceremony. There's the hakame brush decoration that she applies, the horseye swirls that seem to relate to those Zen enso ring decorations or umanome decoration from pottery of the past. But the most important thing is that Lisa's pottery never feels like it's pretending to be Japanese. She's developed such a distinctive palette, a distinctive repertoire of forms, of glazes. The way she works her shino is so different from anything we would see in Japan. There is something about these beautiful cobalt blues that at their darkest are like slick ink. There's this fantastic fiery red in some of her pots. There is something about the way that she's worked towards this body of work, that these characteristics, these trials of combinations of slip, glaze, of firing process have come together. And of course, the fact that her work is soda fired, that make it so distinctly her own. It's become so distinctive, in fact, that even when the pots have no glaze at all on the outside, like these beautiful moon jars in this black clay, something that we've not seen before, encrusted with tiny parts of feldspar. Even then, the gorgeous swell of these forms and that subtle variation in colour that the soda firing brings to work like this, the rivulets of glaze that you see moving around the surface of a pot like this, you know immediately that it's Lisa's work. The more you look at pottery and the more you think about the firing, the more you start to see the kiln and the world inside it as a kind of theatre of life. Every firing, in a way, is a test. It's a challenge to experience, to measurement. It's also when the precariousness of the life of working as a studio potter becomes most apparent, as the kiln takes months, sometimes years of effort and calculation to task. It's a process that can reinforce old, forgotten teachings or teach new things with every disaster that comes. The atmosphere of a soda kiln is not a kind one. Its intensity, its volatility, it mirrors the stresses that Lisa has surrounded herself with over the years. But her great strength has always been her ability to adapt, to see the opportunity for new things, for new experiments within that world of great intensity. You've seen that with some of the pots in this exhibition. The huge tsubo that we looked at earlier, these are the result of COVID, emptying Lisa's studio at Maze Hill Pottery, emptying the normal runs of courses, the visitors coming and going. With the space to breathe, she was able to make pots as large as these, to trial pots as large as these in a way that she'd never been able to before. We've seen it in the fantastic dark, black, matte, glorious colour of those moon jars that we just looked at. Something new to the gallery, something wonderfully calm and serene about them in what is a fairly unserene period of time that we're going through. You also see it in this last shelf of work. When Lisa broke her wrist earlier in the year, she was unable to throw, but with great resolve, with characteristic strength and resolve to keep practicing, she turned to hand carving forms. So we have some of these exquisite incense box forms throughout this exhibition. A really interesting form to allow glazes, slips, soda to move around. And this chawan that's been completely hand carved, a process in Japan that's known as kurinuki, which is given a form that's otherwise quite familiar in Lisa's repertory, a completely different feel. Lisa submits her pots to the kind of testing, the trials and tribulations that she embraces herself. It's that combination of mad chance, of furious industry, of calculated risk that allows her to produce work of the extraordinary breadth, of depth, of character that we see in this exhibition, that allows her to contribute and complete and begin the projects for which she's now best known. Amid all that, the most important facet of Lisa's working is that she is attentive to chance, that she is open to serendipity. She's forever trying new things and always keeping an eye on the kiln for the next new experiment round the corner. I think we've seen that with the wonderful variety in the work in this exhibition. There's of course more to see here, more than 200 pots in this exhibition, more to see than we could ever cover on camera. So if you can, do please visit. It's a wonderful, wonderful show. It should be running from now until at least Christmas time, so get here while the pots are still here. We'd love to see some of you in person. I hope you've enjoyed this walkthrough, and I'll leave you with the wonderful work of Lisa Hammond.